Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Sands, the President and CEO for the Center for Fine Arts Education and the Executive Director for the Florida School Music Association, the Florida Music Education Association. And on behalf of those associations, I want to welcome you to this webinar. The webinar is on the preliminary results of the Performing Arts Aerosol study that we're hoping it's going to be able to help us mitigate some of the factors of COVID-19 in our music classrooms. So in May, and the National Federations of High School, the College Band Directors National Association, and a coalition of over 125 performing arts organizations, including FMEA and FSMA, commissioned a study on the aerosol that you're going to be seeing here. Over the last month and a half, researchers at the University of Colorado-Boulder and the University of Maryland have been working hard gathering preliminary results. And let me note again, these are preliminary results. We do have additional results that will be forthcoming from the study after July 25th, so we'll be providing updates. I'm going to ask that if you have questions to put them in the, to type them in the questions box, and we will do our best to answer what we can, and then we will download those questions if we have additional information that we might need to gather later. So I want to welcome to our stage now is Dr. James Weaver. He's the Director of Performing Arts and Sports for the National Federation of High School State Associations, of which FSMA, the Florida School Music Association, is a member. Dr. James Weaver, he's been a teacher and administrator at the district and state and national level. And as the Director of Performing Arts and Sports, he oversees student participation, professional development, and awareness of performing arts activities through the nation's 19,500 plus high schools. He's earned his bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and he has his PhD as well. Also, he's going to go ahead and walk us through this and talk more about the preliminary study. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Weaver. You're on.
Great, thank you very much. And I'm excited to virtually be in Florida with all of you today. So this is an in-depth discussion on performing arts and the performing arts aerosol study. So I'm going to dive right in and go. And like Kathy mentioned, please go ahead and put any questions you may have in the chat window. We'll try to answer as many as we can. I will preface this, like Kathy just said as well, this is a preliminary discussion as far as what we are looking at with the aerosol study as of today. There are things that we just don't know yet, and we'll know more as we progress through the study. So a couple of things you'll see on the screen here are, we do co-chair this with myself and Dr. Mark Speed. He's the CBDNA president and director of bands from Clemson University. We have our lead funders, which is the NAM Foundation, the National Federation of State High School Associations Foundation, the Dia Foundation, and CBDNA. And then, as mentioned, we would not be able to do this without having the rest of our funders, which is, as you see on the screen, and that includes the Florida Music Association and the Florida Music Education Association. So we're very excited to have you on board for making this possible. So I want a big thank you to the membership in Florida. We have contributed collegiate conference band associations. These are groups of bands that are part of like the Big Ten and those areas, all came together to do some extra funding as well. And then we have our supporting organizations who didn't necessarily give monetary support, but are giving support in other ways that are non-tangible supports. To give you an idea, when we first started off on this project, we were about a $37,000 project, and it has ballooned to $318,000 in projects. So gathering that kind of funds was not fun, but we got it all done in about 22 days, and that shows the strength of this research occurring and the need we have for it in the performing arts area. Our lead researchers are two of the planet's leading environmental engineering researchers. So Dr. Shelley Miller out of the University of Colorado-Boulder and Dr. Jelena Schreebrink out of the University of Maryland. Both of these researchers have specialties in environmental engineering in relation to viral, bacterial, and indoor allergen distribution. And so this is exactly right up their alley, and we're very excited to have them both on board. They both bring extensive research teams behind them, and you'll see some of their work that they've done in their preliminary work. So things we have here is this is exploratory measurements of some of our band instruments and singing. We have conducted all these in controlled clean rooms. So what we'll see is a very small amount of ambient aerosols, even though the actual load of an aerosol in a room is quite higher. But it gives you an idea of like what changes can occur from a normal room going into a room that has singing and musical playing involved there. Our goal is to identify the flow and aerosol release pathways, what the particle sizes and concentrations are, and then the next phase is to improve our aerosol captures and estimate emission rates and the like. One thing that I'll put on this, when this report was made, we were about 10 days into a 5-month study, and so let's keep that in mind as well as we go through some things here. Here's a picture of one of the tests, is the Schlerin test, and we're actually going to go through and show you some Schlerin videos. This is also a photo here of how we are capturing this little guy right here is the input mechanism that we collect the aerosols through. So as it comes out of the French horn, out of the bell, we're able to collect what the aerosol load is in the air coming through. And then each one of these devices over here on the far left, those are different devices that are picking up different particle concentrations, CO2 emissions, large particles, small particles, a whole host of sensors are coming in that's all picked up by this one little sensor here and then divided amongst all these different machines. So our Schlerin test is a flow visualization test, and it identifies how things move about. So what I'll show you here is this is an example of what the Schlerin test will look like. And what I want to show you, this is one of our researchers saying the letter A in front of it. And you'll see here we can watch this cloud kind of ebb and flow as she says the letter A. And I like to show the still picture here just so you're able to see close up what it looks like as aerosols are released from the human body. Now, this is the Schlerin picks up both heat and airflow, and you can tell the difference between the two, which is important in some of the videos we're watching. The heat will always go up, and it'll go up in near straight lines, where airflow will come through and be looking all curved and eddied like this one does. So here we're going to watch a video of our researcher saying the alphabet. So I have to do an audio switch real quick, so bear with me just a moment.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
So you'll see from that video that we could see how all the different letters that are formed out of the human mouth go. Some of them are unidirectional, some are bidirectional, some are tridirectional, depending on how the hard consonant sound reacts. And so one thing that's important about this is we want to be able to really determine the flow. So as we look, if we were to just have one sensor, say like right here in front of her, you'd have noticed throughout the course of the alphabet, we would have missed a lot of the ejection particles coming this way and a lot coming off this way. So this gives an idea of where to start looking as far as where all the particles are going and how they're behaving in the air in front of us. One thing that I found interesting was like the letter F, for example, really had a big cloud that came up and out of the top of the mouth and it came out over this way. So when we start singing different vowels and consonant sounds, it helps us determine more where the aerosol accumulation is going to start occurring. And so it's a very important part of this test. The next one we're going to look at is the clarinet, and I got to do my audio switcheroo here real quick, but kind of watch the bell of the clarinet, and then when we start showing where the finger keys are, the keyholes are, watch there because you're going to see a combination of heat and aerosols coming out, especially as we start playing in the lower registers. You'll start seeing a lot of the aerosol airflow coming out of the keyholes. So let me switch my audio here, and then we'll play this video. So you could see there towards the end when she was lifting the fingers off the keyholes, we were starting to see an exhalation of air coming out of there, which makes sense. But but that's one of the things we're really have to look at as far as we go. So what you're going to see now is we're going to play inside of a bag. And this is not a mitigation strategy that we're saying should or should not be used at the current moment. We're just trying to show, one, can we collect all the aerosols? And then two, where do all the aerosols go once we collect them? And can we measure the collection rates of the aerosols? So that's really what we're looking at here. So here's this video with the clarinet in a bag.
So you're breathing.
So what we're seeing here is that the bag really does appear to stop a lot of the aerosols. And what you see coming out of here was actually a lot of heat coming out of the hand holes that were here. One reason we're not thinking about this right now as a mitigation technique, because a researcher who was playing the clarinet said that it got very, very hot and difficult to play within the bag. Plus, being pedagogically to our younger players, you would not be able to see what their hands are doing inside the bag. So there's some other mitigation things we want to make sure we look at to ensure that what we're recommending is still educationally valid and able to perform, but also we don't want them playing for 10 minutes and all of a sudden it gets so hot in the bag that we're just kind of sweating and slipping all over the place on the instrument. So a couple of things to think about on that. We'll be doing some more research and testing on this as we move forward. So this is just a photo of what the bag looks like and how it worked. I know there's been a lot of online stuff with the bag for the clarinet. We did put a wire kind of, what would you call it? Like a tube from your dryer, the wire mesh from that to kind of bulk it up a little bit to make it stay, so that way the bag doesn't fall on top of the instrument. But this is right now for laboratory research to kind of figure out what we're doing with the aerosols. So I'm going to show you the trombone now. There's a couple of things we'll look at in the trombone. And I'm actually going to fast forward this component a little bit so we are beyond the bell component here, because when we move the hand, we're getting a lot of heat off the hand. So just kind of watch here, and then the next thing you'll see is we'll be using a 50 and an 80 denier multi-layer kind of pantyhose material on the bell, and you'll see it in a couple of ways. And the reason I'm describing this is because I have to switch the microphone over, and I don't want to pause you in the middle. But what you'll see is when we put the nylon material on the bell, we really much see a stoppage of all the aerosol airflows coming out of the bell. Then we use a pop style filter, and you'll see, and from the bell to the pop filter, you'll start seeing a lot of aerosols there, but after the pop filter, you really see none. So it really would have to be attached to the instrument, but it is showing that this is being successful in stopping it. The problem is if it's not attached to the instrument, it's going to flow all over the place, except for the one direction where the pop filter is. So here's the trombone stuff. So you'll see there that as we put the filter in front of the trombone, we really were able to stop a lot of the aerosols coming out. And when we started doing more testing on it, we really realized that it's an 80 denier thickness that's folded in half, basically, to create a multi-layer thickness as far as the bell cover goes. The next one we're going to watch here is a singer, and she's going to sing a couple different things. And one thing the first thing you're going to see is we're going to be singing a pop song from the song Rent, and watch the Schlerin test kind of go everywhere for the airflows when she sings the word love, and that's going to be important when I get into some of the results. And then the next part we'll watch is she'll sing some other warm-ups in a hymn style thing with a mask on, and you'll be able to see the difference there. The one reason why I can't show you the video of her wearing a mask while singing Rent for a direct comparison is because we just didn't have that recorded at the time. So as we progress this week, we'll obviously have those recorded, but the results were the same. You'll see that there's going to be a much different Schlerin result from a masked versus an unmasked. So I'm going to get my audio switched over here, and we'll be ready to. And what you'll see here is that I stopped it at this moment because you can see all the aerosols are basically stopped coming from outside of the mouth. However, if you look up here, because the mask isn't quite fitted perfectly on here or at the nose, you see a lot of the aerosols coming up here out of the bridge. And we need to do a lot more studying to see what that is going to do. But what's encouraging about this is if you looked at the compared to the mask versus no mask, this stops a lot of the airflow coming out. And one of the things our environmental engineers are really talking about is whenever you look for air quality control within an inside space, the closer you can keep that uncontrolled event to the source, the more success you have controlling that environment. So even though we are still seeing some aerosols dispel out from the nose out to the forehead and up to the top of the head, the amount that we are seeing, as you can see here, is drastically reduced compared to just the open singing. So what we have now is we're going to go through some preliminary lab results. This is going to be a CPC and APS measurements. So a couple of things we want to read here is these are preliminary results from our first week of exploratory testing. The focus is on this is strictly on the distribution of respiratory aerosols that are released while playing wind and brass instruments, and then singing, acting, speaking, dancing, during simulated aerobic activity. That's what we're going to be focusing on. Just for everyone's knowledge, we are not using live virus. We're not infecting participants because that would cost millions of dollars in governmental level labs for that. This study is designed to identify the performing arts activities that generate respiratory aerosols, especially for volume, direction, and density. We estimate the emission rates of respiratory aerosols. We model the dispersion of these aerosols and investigate the mitigation strategies. So that's really what our scope of this project is. We're staggering the release because of the size, and we want to make sure that we're getting the people who are rehearsing today, make sure they get their information now, and then we'll have more information on the end of July for the other areas. As we dig deeper into the study, as we start going farther and farther into that 5 months, then we're going to be finding a lot more areas for our overall knowledge, and then get this peer-reviewed. We are doing a simultaneous lab doubles check. So the UC Boulder is doing the work, and then University of Maryland is almost in real time duplicating the work, but in a different fashion. So we're using large chamber releases for the UC Boulder one, and for the University of Maryland, we're using a kind of a box inside of a box idea. So we're trying to capture the aerosols in 2 different ways with the hopes of getting the same results. So far, that has been successful. We are getting the same results in both labs, which is encouraging. So we know that the mitigation strategies we're starting to come up with are testable and provable using 2 different methods to come up with the same result, which is what we want to see happen. A couple definitions we have here, which is the condensation particle counters. So the CPC is really looking at all of the aerosols out there up to very small micron levels. We do know the virus can travel on particles down to the size of 3 microns. To put that into a relationship, the width of a human hair is about 100 microns. So this is very, very small. And then the next one is the aerodynamic particle sizer, which looks at a little larger particles. So here's an example of the trumpet data. So here we're looking at, this is a high C in the trumpet exercises. And you'll see here we're looking at about 620, 630 parts per cubic centimeter that are then expelled as far as aerosol goes. So a cubic centimeter is very small. And you'll see here just how many particles we're producing. Then what we did is we covered the bell, and this is with a plastic cover. We were going to use saran wrap or something that was cheap and easily disposable. Found out you can blow a hole right through that. So this plastic that I have covered here is actually they cut open a Ziploc bag, which has a thicker material to it, and then use painter's tape to tape it onto the bell. And you'll see here, here's our high C with no mitigation, and here's the same high C with the plastic tape to the bell. We got a very similar result to this when we used that 80 denier nylon material that was multi-layered. So we see we drop from 630-ish parts per cubic centimeter down to 150 parts per cubic centimeter. And then if you look here, we then put a bell or a mask on the player and put a slit through so the mouthpiece and the embouchure can connect. And then right here, this line here is the same high C as what we have over here. So you'll see that no mitigation with bell, only mitigation with player mask and instrument mask. We're really dropping it down to just a little bit above ambient levels months of aerosol. So really, it's not that much higher than when we had them read something in the room. Then we see here we took the bell cover off and just had them play the mask, and it had almost a funneling effect. So the real mitigation that we want to focus on here is both the bell covering and the mask covering, making sure that the bell covering is at least that multi-layer 80 denier thickness. And that nylon material right now is seeming to be good. That may change, but as of right now, we're looking at that as successful with a masked player with a slit in the embouchure. People are always like, well, if we just move away, this 1 meter away uncovered doesn't seem so bad. However, you have to realize that we are now 3 feet away playing into an inlet that's 1 cubic centimeter in size, and we're picking up this many particles in there. So this is actually a lot of particles for being that far away and having a target that is so small. So more research on this to be had. This distance thing should not be taken as a automatic good news being 3 feet or so away. Then what's nice about it is when we look at the larger particles, we see the same thing, the same trends. Here's our high note, here's our mitigation 1, here's our combined mitigation strategies. And so we almost eliminate the intensity of the larger particles with those 2 mitigation strategies. We look at here with the flute, and one thing I'm going to kind of gloss over the flute a little bit is we're going to go back and retest the flute, because what we're finding here is this flute data doesn't look that bad, and we really thought the flute was going to be one of the worst instruments we could have. However, we are taking good news with a lot of skepticism and going back and retesting. We're taking the bad news and right away being like, all right, we got some bad news, now let's see what's going on next. So this actually looks pretty good, because if you look at the scale on the side, we're only talking 50 parts per cubic centimeter with the flute. We have a theory on this, is that in order to produce aerosols, you need to have a wet vibrating surface. So think about mouthpiece buzzing, or buzzing on the mouthpiece, the reed slapping against the mouthpiece and woodwind instruments, singing with the vibration of the vocal cords. But then on the flute, there's really nothing to vibrate. You're just putting over a column of air. So you're really talking just large particles that are going to fall to the ground pretty quick. So we are still going to do some testing on this. We want to see if we can get some large particle generations to occur inside the flute, and then see what we can do to mitigate those. But for sure, a lot more information to come on the flute. So, but at first blush, it's looking promising. We just want to be skeptical until we can prove that it's promising. French horn, you'll see here, same kind of trend line. We have the mask with the bell closed here. Then we play with a mute, and then a mask and a mute. And you notice these didn't drop off as much as we wanted compared to the other ones. One thing we found with the mute is that it looks like it's promising to use as a mitigation technique. However, one thing we found out is that the air streams are just being split around the mute and then accelerating past the sensor for when we did the mute. So we're actually generating more and throwing it farther with the mute than without the mute. So this is kind of a misnomer on that one. And then this giant spike here is when they open up the door to the lab. You can see how clean the clean room is. Here's a soprano singer. Right here is where they start singing the word love. So when we saw all those aerosols expel out of her mouth, this is the word love. What's great about it is when we sang with the mask, these 5 little lines right here, down here, are the same love. And then we had a screen that she sang in front of. Here's the 5 lines here with the screen. And so what we found right off the bat is that if you could get a mask on, you'll dramatically reduce the amount of aerosols that we're able to detect, which is really good. So we're kind of recommending that everyone sing with a mask, and the better the fit, the better protection you have. Then we get into the clarinet here, and you'll see we've got the same kind of thing. Lots of aerosols being generated near the keys, near the bell. So here's the keys on here, so that's a little bit better. But one thing we want to go back and test on the keys is, especially in the lower register, how much is coming out of each particular key, and can we really capture what the aerosol load is doing? And then also, again, the lower register, the more keyholes that are open, how are we judging and measuring how that's all working? So we're hypothesizing that this scales near the keys will be somewhat up here once we take into account all the keyholes that are open and not just a few keyholes that the sensor is near. But what's encouraging is when we did the pantyhose test, which is the 80 denier thickness in a multi-layer, you'll see here that this right here looks like it just drops down to this levels down here, which is really exciting for us. So we have more to do with the clarinet because we know we have some practical things to determine as far as like how to cover the clarinet, how to make sure that the material that we're using as a mitigation doesn't get stuck in the keyholes, what to do for heat, excuse me, and those kinds of things. And you'll see here like our playing with the pantyhose over is similar to the playing in a bag. And so we have that to go with, which is also good. And you'll see here there's a larger concentration or larger particles over time. So a couple of remarks I have on the initial testing is the exploratory results indicate the need to contain the aerosol emissions in a smaller sampling volume. The size measurements show particles typically are in the 10 micron or nanometer, sorry, micron size. The concentrations were relatively higher for instruments that had straight shapes from mouthpiece to bell. So we're thinking the trumpet, clarinet. Even though we do have the tubing bends in the trumpet, it is pretty much a straight shape as far as airflow is determined. Also, masks, nylon bell coverings, they all seem to reduce the particle concentrations while performing. So now we're going to get into some modeling here. And this is going to be fun. We're going to look at, I'm going to skip the page. There's a lot of information on this page, but it is posted on the NFHS website. So if you want to go back and look at it at your leisure, you're more than welcome to. But we're going to look at a few different cases here. Case 1 is this one here. So this little blue guy here in the chart is the same size as this person in the blue here. This is an outdoor space, a 20 meter by 60 meter by 20 meter. Airflow is coming in from the left and going out on the right. This indoor case, we have airflow coming in at the ceiling, going out near the top of the room. This one, we have airflow coming in at the top of the room and going out at the bottom of the room. I'm going to show you why these are all important, because we have people's classrooms and outdoor spaces that are designed to like all 3 of these models, and we'll show you what the risk level assessments are based on the Riley-Wells, the Riley-Wells model, which is a very trusted model for the last couple decades on viral contagion percentages. So what we see here is an outdoor case. So we're singing in this outdoor space here. And with this, what ends up happening is at the blue, the dark blue is our 0 to 10% ability to have a viral contamination here. And this is after 90 minutes unmasked singing. And so then this lighter blue here is we're in the 20% range, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then up here we're in the hundreds percent of the risk of infection after 90 minutes. This is at the height of the mouth opening. This is also somebody singing straight ahead, not turning their head for 90 minutes. So obviously we know that we're all going to be turning heads and doing things because we can't do music without movement. And so we can basically imagine an arc going around this direction here of these colors. And so this is something important to remember as we move forward. So then we broke it down in different cases of time. And so here's a 10-minute period, which is really low risk, a 20-minute period, still low, a 30-minute, 60-minute. And what happens, what we found is after the 30-minute mark, we start to get an exponential growth of the risk level on here. So if you look at this, we are really watching exponential growth at 60 minutes, and as we saw in the 90 minutes, a real exponential growth there. So our research team right now is starting to suggest that 30-minute sweet spot for rehearsal time periods. If we move inside, what you'll see here is this light blue, this 20% risk level here is the ambient level after 60 minutes of singing unmasked. This big dark blue column of air here is your new airflow coming in from your HVAC system. And over here, you see a very tiny sliver of air coming out here on the left, and that's your air outflow at the top of the room. You'll see here how the aerosols have ebbed and flowed and eddied and created eddies around. One reason why we're not recommending those plexiglass partitions, because when you put those up, it'll actually interfere with how your airflow moves and could create one of these eddies around other players right above the plexiglass shielding. So more information on that one. And then here you'll see an overhead view of that same model. Then we looked at the same thing with the 10, 20, 30, and 60-minute time periods. We see an exponential growth occurring after 30 minutes with our 60-minute time. So right here, we're really recommending that indoor 30-minute time period for rehearsals. Then in the next case, where we have airflow coming in from the top, and then you'll see down here in the bottom right, this little blue blob here, that's the airflow going out. Well, what we've noticed here is that this ambient area in the of the risk level is now in the 30% range. So what happens here is that the good air is coming in and then not mixing around like we saw with the other one, and so it's just filling the risk level up inside of the room. And so we show these two models because schools commonly have the model where it comes into the top and out of the top, and also into the top and out at the bottom. And so we want to make sure that as we look at these in the HVAC systems, this is kind of what we're looking at. So again, you'll see on our Wells-Riley equation that the 30-minute time period is kind of that sweet spot to make sure we're having a reduced risk of potential infection components. So again, you can read this one here. This is a lot of information on it. The contact at UMD is really important, and they have some animations that we put on the slide deck that you can go check out at your leisure as well. So some general considerations we're looking at is masks to be worn by all students and staff prior to entering the performance hall or the performing arts classroom. Masks should be continued to be worn until all students are seated and ready for instruction. Excuse me. This includes long rest periods, sectionals, moving around the room, getting ready to go to the bathroom, anything like that. No talking should occur in the room without a mask being properly worn. When possible, a mask with a small slit for mouthpiece access should be worn while playing. We are running into an issue with the delicacy of the end of a elbow reed and the slit in the mask and making sure that all works right. So we're going to go back and readjust some things so we can find out something better with that. That is becoming a concern, specifically with double reeds, just because of the delicacy of the tip of the mouth of the reed. Then the next thing we're looking at is when possible, an instrument group where masks cannot physically be worn. So just like I mentioned with the oboe, if that becomes the case where we can't figure out how to make the mask work with the delicacy of the reed, then the mask should be worn around the chin and replaced during periods where the student's not playing. And that includes rests and includes talking. So there we go on those. Otherwise, we're looking at social distancing should occur as suggested by the CDC. So currently that is a 6 foot by 6 foot space around each student. Really recommend kind of boxing that out with some sort of a painter's tape or a gaff tape, or if you have the ability to just kind of mark the ground. And then the idea is that every student should remain in the center of those 6 by 6 foot spaces. That way each student is automatically 6 feet apart. This will reduce the number of students that typically fit inside a performing arts classroom. We also want to make sure that everyone's doing straight lines, because as we curve the setup, it'll change the directionality of the flow of the aerosols. We want to make sure we check that out as well. Students should sit facing the same direction from the back of the room to the front of the room to minimize exposure. And then we're also finding that there's a lot of aerosols in the trombone slide as you go into extended positions, especially if there happens to be any air leakage out of the spit valve there, or those kinds of things. So we're really watching that. We're going to be studying this more, but our preliminary considerations are talking about having a 9 by 6 foot area for trombone players. So an additional 3 feet in front of the trombone. So as they're set up in a box, the player would be seated 3 feet in front of the back line with 6 more feet remaining in front of them. The next one we have here is on general considerations is spit valve should not be emptied on the floor. We recommend using a puppy pad or something similar to catch the contents of the spit valve and discard that at the end of rehearsal. And there's a lot of creative ways people have been thinking about doing this. So be creative, but we really don't want to see the contents of the condensation be put on the any longer, because we know for sure that it will carry viral load. And then evaporation will do some things there. Your storage area should be managed to limit the number of students at a time into a room. And anyone who enters should bring an alcohol wipe in, wipe it on the surface, open the storage areas, get what they need, close it, wipe it down again, discard the disinfecting wipe afterwards. Teachers should consider using a portable amplifier to keep their voices at a low conversational volume. We do know that the louder you speak, the more aerosols you produce, and we're hypothesizing that's because of your vocal cords vibrating. The louder you speak, the more they vibrate, the more aerosols you're able to project and move forward. Students should also ask all questions in a low conversational volume with a mask. And then teachers, we assume you're going to be talking the most in the class. So as a result, we suggest wearing the most efficient mask possible, which is readily available, which are those blue surgical masks. N95s would be recommended, but we have supply chain issues. And so we're not really going to recommend those at the current time. Also, general considerations is if your existing HVAC system can be fitted with HEPA filtrations, we really recommend that to happen. Even if you can add HEPA filter, we recommend more HEPA filter air purifiers being placed in the room that's appropriate for the size of your rehearsal space. And there's plenty of those in the market at the current moment. The other thing we want to do is look at the rate of air change that you have. And the faster you can change the rate of air change per hour, and there's a formula here you see on the screen to figure that out. But the faster you can make that happen, the faster you can have rehearsals occur between rehearsals in order to kind of quote unquote clean the room out. The one thing that we're researching right now, which we hope to have by the end of the month, is what happens if we increase from like an average of 3 air change rates per hour to 10? Does that then change the modeling for how long a rehearsal can be? We don't know this yet, but we're looking into it, and we hopefully will know in the next couple of weeks. And then I would really recommend having a conversation with your facilities management, or your custodial staff, whoever runs the HVAC systems within your building, to find out how many air change rates per hour you have. Can you increase those? And if you can't, what's the options of getting HEPA filtration added to your HVAC system, or adding more HEPA air purifiers into your room. So if you have a 3,000 square foot room, if you go to Lowe's and get a 1,500 square foot, to buy 2 of those, or HEPA air purifier, you need to buy 2 of those for the size of your room. The other thing we want to double check too is the volume of your room, because most music rooms have much higher ceilings than your typical room that a HEPA filter at Lowe's would be bought for. So you want to definitely check the volume and make sure that the volume of room, even though it may say 1,000 square feet on the box, you got to see, well, that 1,000 square feet with a 9-foot ceiling, and I've got 20-foot ceilings, so your volume is going to be a little bit bigger. So it's a little bit of math for us to figure out as far as which HEPA filters to buy, but something that facilities management should be able to help with. Also, right now, the best practice we have is to maintain outdoor rehearsals as possible. So if we are looking at this, and we know the summer is very hot across most of the country, including Florida. And so also severe weather is a thing. So if it's going to rain or anything else, and then sun exposure issues as well. Because typically on a marching band, you'd rehearse in the morning, you'd go inside to the air conditioning, have more rehearsal, and then you'd come back after dinner when it starts to cool down again and go back out for more field rehearsal. So if you feel you need to have a tent to limit exposure to the elements, we recommend a tent somewhere like this, where it's really high, has a really high pitched and then pitched ceiling to it, and then no sides. Obviously, the breezier the day, the better, because it's going to move the clean air through there a little bit easier. So, and we have some more marching band guidance here as far as what you can do. Again, really recommending those bell covers with the multi-layer high denier nylon material, and then following those CDC guidelines as well to really try to reduce the amount of risk you have in producing aerosols inside of the band and choir rooms. We also do have an NFHS guide return to high school marching band. So if you need to check that out, I know Kathy has access to that. There's a risk estimator tool here that's been put on by the University of Colorado-Boulder, and it can help project kind of what can occur inside your classroom. And this is good because you can actually put the volume of your room in there, and then you can change the air change rates per hour, and then really determine like how much the viral risk will go. So that's a very important thing to do as well. With that, I believe we can go ahead and take some questions.
James, this is Kathy. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I did have people send some questions.
Okay.
And one of them was, how often, how often do you need to, I guess, wash or clean the masks and the bell covers?
Right, so that would be a thing where we kind of want to make sure that the students are going to do self-care, which we all know how well that occurs, right? But we want to make sure that they're washing their stuff daily in order to make sure that it's clean. Now, I know this is hard to do because I know, like, for example, I have a middle school son, and getting him to wash his mask or just give me his mask every day to wash for him is sometimes a challenge. And so, but we really do want to make sure that some of that is put on the student's responsibility and have it washed daily.
Another question is, are the Clarinet bags actually necessary? And I know you answered that, but there's so much information that, you know, I thought I'd go ahead and ask that question.
Yeah, so we don't really know that yet. We don't know if they're necessary because we're not exactly sure. Because when in that test, we used the Clarinet bag to see if we could catch all the aerosols, right? That was really our goal, and then measure it from there. Right now, I don't know if we need to have Clarinet bags on everybody in the band. For one, it gets a little bit funky, right? If we have to have all those bags on there, and it's going to get hot, and there's a lot of issues that go with that. So we have a lot more study to do. So right now, we're not really recommending the Clarinet bag just because we don't know, one, how effective it is, and two, how practical it's going to be in a real world setting. Things that we're waiting to test out some more.
Okay. Another question that came in, and again, you answered it, but how much time do we need between classes in the rehearsal room for the the air conditioning to clean the rehearsals? Mm-hmm. Rehearsal space, and that's that whole thing with the volume and the height and right. the HEPA filter.
Yep. So it really depends on how many air change rates per hour you're able to produce. So right now the recommendation is if you only have 3 air change rates per hour, we were looking at about 60 minutes between rehearsals, which is a really long time, and I totally understand it. So before people panic on the call, you know, what we're looking at is, can you increase that air change rate per hour through your HVAC system, which many modern buildings are able to just increase the air flow there. If you're not able to do that, can you add some HEPA filters, which would increase the air change rate per hour? And if you can, the more you can get that air change rate per hour to go through, the shorter that time will get. So if you can go from like 3 to 10, well, now we're going from an hour to 15 to 20 minutes, right? And so the trade-off, though, is you're going to have some additional sound that will occur from that because there are things will be louder. But again, it goes to this thing, like I'm looking at COVID as the binary choice, right? So my binary choice is, well, I can't have band or choir because my air rate's not enough because it's too loud, or do I have to deal with some louder HVAC for the moment until we figure out this whole COVID thing? I'm going to deal with a louder HVAC system for the moment, right? So when we're looking at those two options, it kind of is what it is, but I'd much rather have the ability to have more classes and do it in a safer manner than just not have them at all.
Another question is, an indoor school classroom sectional rehearsal of 90 minutes with no mask, with 12 people playing woodwinds safe?
No.
So the main thing we've talked about many times, it has to do with the with masks. And so you want the mask, and now we're talking about the time. And then again, that falls back onto when the air change takes place in a room and how quickly and how long you could have those. I know that there's schools, school districts and schools in Florida right now that are going to a 4x4, which they didn't have before. Those are 90-minute classes. And the thing about that is, of course, we're talking about it for music classes and theater and that sort of thing, debate. But regular classrooms, also 90 minutes of students talking in a science classroom or math class or any of them. Can you just address that just briefly?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the big thing is, like what I mentioned before, is our environmental engineers really want to have that. The most effective mitigation we have is keeping the aerosols as close to the source as possible. So when you talk about putting 12, 15 people in a room with no masks on for 90 minutes, a couple of things are going to happen. One thing that's going to happen is that you're going to have the source be uncontained. It's just going to go out there. And then that eventually is going to accumulate throughout the room. as that accumulation effect continues to increase, we're going to start having that increased risk of virus. If someone is like asymptomatically exposed, then they're going to have that risk of viruses in the room. And as we watch those modeling components that we saw, the longer you're in that room unmasked, the more likely it is that the ambient level of aerosol has a higher chance of carrying a viral capacity to it. So if you're talking 15 people in, say, you know, standard classroom, which is about 500 to 750 square feet, it won't take long for that to compile with 15 people in it. And so that's why for music side, we're really talking 30 minutes. But for a regular classroom, we have not tested that. But I mean, if you kind of just look at the models we had here, you can kind of think of like, wow, there's a difference in aerosol, so they're going to be producing a little bit less by talking. But if you have 15 people talking unmasked, that is still going to increase the size, especially if you don't have proper distancing measures and those kind of things in play.
And the one thing with our educational specifications out of our Tallahassee Department of Education, at one point the room size for regular classrooms was 850 to 900 square feet for the regular classrooms. Now that's not the same for the music classrooms or the visual arts classrooms or the others performing spaces. So could you tell us what's to come? Where are we? We know this is the information that came out on July 10th, but we know that there's a lot more information to come, and just tell us how that's going to kind of play out so that we can continue to be informed.
Yep. So what we're going to be doing is we'll have all of the rest of the band instruments done, all the rest of the vocal side done, we'll have some of the theatrical things done, and we'll have trying to think here, I'll have speaking done, and I think I'll have the aerobic component done. So I'll be almost done with all the different stages. And the reason why it takes so long is everyone is tested 3 times with the same process every time to ensure that we're getting consistent results. And so that just takes a lot of time in the lab. Also, these experiments are very taxing on the performers because we're putting them in a 10-foot by 10-foot room that's sealed off and then basically turned into a near vacuum because we're sucking all the air out of it as far as the aerosol air goes. And so they're getting a near vacuum thing. And so when they're playing, and then we're making them play basically a collegiate level solo for 8 straight minutes. And then we're making them play it 4 times with different mitigation techniques. And then we're making them do it 3 times in a row. And so it's very taxing on the people who are doing the experimentation. So we all need to write them a thank you note. But because of that, it takes just some time. And so that's really kind of why it's taking the time it's taking. So we should have all that stuff done here by the end of the month. And then we'll be putting out a more public release of all the information than we did the first go around. The first go around, we really wanted to focus on our coalition members who supported and made this study really happen. And we didn't want to go 100% open on the first round with the public because we needed to get the reaction from the coalition first. This next go around, and we also didn't have all the data we wanted to kind of start throwing out. And so with this, with more complete structure, we'll be having a more public release of all of that information. And we'll make sure that everyone knows in advance, so we'd like to.
Will the coalition be will go out to the coalition first or not?
Yeah, so we'll have information going to the coalition first, but then we'll probably do like a giant webinar for everybody. So that way, so Kathy, you can go ahead and invite everyone from Florida. Say, all right, we're all going to hear it. Log on this time, and away we go.
Oh, I had another question. Could you talk a little bit about the elementary, the grades 3 through 5, and what's being tested there for mitigation purposes?
Yep. So in grades 2 through 5, we're going to test singing, humming, and recorder. Recorder, we think we're going to be able to use the same mitigations techniques as we use for the flute and the clarinet. Probably more so the flute than the clarinet because there's no vibration on the recorder as far as the reed against the mouthpiece. And then we'll be using the mask for the students, and then we're looking at humming and seeing if there's a difference in the humming aerosols that are produced without mask. And so maybe that's a mitigation because we all know like those little ones. Like I have a 2nd grader, and for her to wear a mask all the time is really challenging for her, even though she's a good sport and just does it. But if we could figure out a way to make it so we can hum instead of sing, maybe that'll help out some of those really little kids to have a break from the mask. But we don't know that yet, so we're going to be testing that out as well.
Okay. Well, I still don't see any other questions at this point. I really thank you so much for you and Mark for heading this up for us. I think there's some valuable information here for everyone on the call. If you go to the NFHS, National Federation of High Schools, .org, then you'll have all the information. And one of the things that we've done on our websites for the music associations here in Florida is the link to it rather than us download information. We would rather keep it on the NFHS, and we just provide the link so that you could go there to their website in case they'll continue to update the information more readily than I think most of the other places if we were to download it. So that's how you'll get the information. We continue to have information put out in our e-blasts, our monthly e-blasts, and on our website. So. And
I will say too that Kathy, that's a good point, because we are constantly updating everything that's on that website all the time as we get new stuff from the researchers. We also launched 2 new tools today on that website. So if anybody on here has a question, we do now have a submit a question feature on the Aerosol study page. And then we also have an FAQ blog that we've started. And so Mark and I are finding out we're getting 500 to 600 emails a day just on the Aerosol study. And we're only 2 people that we can't handle that, right? And so what we'll be doing is answering most of the questions through the FAQ blog, and then getting most of those questions submitted through the research or through the ask a question feature on that website. Both of those functions should be up and running now. If they're not up and running now, they'll be running by about 6 o'clock Eastern time tonight.
I think they are. I think I saw them a little bit earlier.
Okay.
I didn't click on it, but I do believe that it is up there now. So,
yeah.
Well, I want to thank everyone. We will continue as an association to keep you apprised of any of the information of this study. I do know, and also the final piece of the study that doesn't come out to November, December, where after it's been vetted by the other researchers and that sort of thing. So this is preliminary, but these are some things that you can kind of think about, talk about, and I know the music supervisors throughout the state meet weekly, and they've been having a lot of the conversations that might be helpful for their individual schools. So I thank everyone, and James, you've been fantastic, and I really love working with you with NFHS, and so I appreciate that. And I thank everyone on this, and we'll keep you posted. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you, everybody.